Make sure to be a member on the channel, link is in the description. Hello guys, once again it's Matt, and today we have another video. And yeah, thank you guys for all these new subscribers. Thank you for my two members, Lafoche and Viviani. And let's get into it. So make sure to sub and let's get into it. So today we are going to talk about the MiG-23's radar, the Sapphire RP-23 MLA-2, which is the radar on the MLD, and it's very similar to the radar on the MLA as well, so you can kind of consider that it's a little bit worse, the MLA one, but not by much. So yeah, but anyway, I think after we covered the F-14 radar, which is the AWG-9, we need to take a look on the MiG-23's, because you know, it's kind of the counter to it right now, and a lot of the meta is changing to BVR, so you need to know how to use this radar to actually kill everything. With one of the best missiles in top tier, the R-24, it can be used to actually destroy most of the targets that you face, and at certain ranges it's kind of impossible to just make this missile miss, you know. So yeah, so let's get into it. So technically we have 4 normal search modes, you know. We have, of course, 2 track modes, and we have one other you know, like a dogfight mode for vertical scan to use in dogfights. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the 4 search modes, which are the more complicated ones. Of course, we normally use the normal search. So one thing that you have to know about this radar is that the Russians actually developed a way to counter the ground clutter without using pulse Doppler. It's not perfect, and it's not as close to the pulse Doppler effectiveness, but it can be used in certain altitudes until you are low enough so that the pulse Doppler mode, the MTI mode in this aircraft, can be used. So basically you have 4 modes, as I said, 4 search modes. 2 of them for high altitude and 2 of them for low altitude. So basically, normally they change it from low to high automatically when you pass kind of 2,000 meters, depending on the map and stuff like that. But normally it's 2,000 meter, kind of 6,000 feet, a little bit more than that. So yeah, it's just a way so that you can actually it's just automatic, you know. So you go from the low altitude for the high altitude. So basically what the Russians had was, let's talk about first the high altitude mode, and you will understand why they used this system of 2 types of altitudes and stuff. So yeah, you have the normal search mode, which will have, of course, the 60 degrees of a search pattern with 13 degrees of vertical search, or 9, you can choose between them, and 30 kilometers, 60 kilometers, or 90 kilometers of scale, being the normal max ranging high altitudes for fighter sized targets are basically 52 kilometers, and for bombers is like 75 kilometers. So don't expect at low altitudes than we normally are in battles, you know, you're not going to be able to you know, detect most of the past 30-40 kilometers, because you are flying low. So yeah, the max range is a little bit worse, you know. So yeah, like I said, it's not a fully pulse Doppler radar, so it always kind of has a little bit of ground clutter, but it's still a very good mode. Remember, this is a normal mode. Technically it's continuous wave, but I don't know, because there's some very complex things about it, so I'm not gonna say that it's continuous wave, but it's just a normal search mode that doesn't use pulse Doppler. Okay, as far as I know, it's really hard to find information on that, but the MiG-23's radar actually can compute and filter out the ground clutter after it detects it in some way or form. I really don't know exactly. It's really complex, and you kind of have to have a engineering degree to actually understand this. But yeah, it's just a normal search mode. It will detect targets to 50 kilometers basically and stuff like that. It is basically just looking straight ahead on the horizon, upwards. So it basically means that it's looking up. It's a little bit tilted up. And yeah, and one thing that you have to consider that it's not added to the game, so it's a missing feature that this radar had. Um, because a lot of people complain about the search of just 60 degrees horizontally, and that's just a kind of a lie. The aircraft could turn the antenna itself to the right or to the left, making it have the 120 degrees of detection, but the antenna, the antenna itself would turn, so you would be just looking at the 60 degrees to your front, to the left, to the right, or to the left. So yeah, it basically means that it can change the direction that the antenna is pointing at, and making it like the MiG-29 in DCS, for example, if you know the game. So yeah, the scales is normal, 60 kilometers, search, normal things. And of course, if you are high, we are talking about the high altitude ones, we have the search mode look down. So basically this does two things to the normal look down mode. It still has the 30 kilometers, 60s and 90 kilometers of scale, still has the 9 degrees of vertical or 13, and it basically tilts the antenna down, which will make it look directly at front of you, and then downwards 9 degrees or 13 degrees. Okay, it is still a normal mode. It doesn't have pulse Doppler or anything like that, but the objective of this is detecting targets that are flying at least 2,000 meters or above, but it can detect less than that. I detected targets from like 500 meters and looking down. So yeah, it is not pulse Doppler, but it has some kind of filtering that helps a lot. Looking down, you won't be able to, I mean, it depends on the situation, but normally you won't be able to detect targets from much past beyond 20, 25 kilometers, of course, because it has the ground clutter. It's a lot harder to detect targets, but still very effective, and it is just able to do it without the pulse Doppler just fine. You really don't need it. You would still in real life had the same system of tilting the antenna left or right, but in game we don't have that yet. And it's just the normal look down mode that I do normally use. I use this mode a lot because I normally tend to climb a lot with this aircraft in Era B, so you ended up using a lot. It has much more aggressive thinking on the ground clutter. The measures that they make for ground clutter filtering is a little bit better than the normal search, but not by much. It's basically a normal search looking down, so you have a lot of ground clutter, but the radar itself, it's good enough so that it can actually filter out everything. So it's pretty interesting. So these would be the normal modes that you use. The look down and the normal search mode. I normally don't use the MTI. The MTI is just for very specific purposes, you know, um, because especially because the MTI is only for low altitude. And another thing is that for the normal search, you don't have problems with notching. Of course, you have problems with flares and chaff, but if the target is coming towards you, even though the lock is on the chaff, the missile will go for the aircraft, because the radiation of an upcoming aircraft that is closer than the chaff that you are actually locking is stronger. The bouncing radiation on that is stronger than the bouncing radiation on the chaff, so the missile will decide to go for the aircraft. That depends a lot on the aggressiveness of the notch that the aircraft makes and the amount of chaff it releases. But in general, this would be the idea, and it's just alright. So yeah, basically this is it. So it has the normal search mode and then the normal look down mode. So basically this means that the aircraft have these. These are the main modes for you. I know a lot of people like to fly low with this aircraft and use the R-24T, for IR stuff. But I still think the R-24R is just better. It's really hard to evade this missile at some distances, like less than 10 kilometers. It's really difficult in a head-on to actually miss this missile. So yeah, I don't know. I still prefer to use two 24Rs, but still, it's personal preference. So at low altitudes, of course, after you descend to 2,000 meters or after um, before you climb to away from 2000 meters, you will have two modes. So you have the normal search mode at low altitude. This feels like a normal mode, but it is a little bit different. It has more filters than the normal search mode that in high altitude uses that, you know. So it's just a normal mode that you see in the high altitude, but with more filters for ground clutter. It still has a lot of ground clutter, but it is even limited to 30 kilometers, so you cannot change the distance. You can increase the pattern for 13 degrees vertically, but still it is kind of limited, you know. But you won't be detecting anybody pass beyond 30 kilometers anyway at low altitudes like this. Only if you actually you know, look up. You really look up. One thing that you have to consider why this mode has actually more filtering systems than the normal search mode at high altitudes is that even if you fly you know, just leveled, you know, you will have basically no ground clutter until you actually look at the ground. So you won't have any back, you know, radiation coming towards your radar anyway, you know. So it's a little bit less effective at longer ranges, but it has very good ground clutter filtering abilities. And for those really against the ground situations that you have to face, one of them, the main mode that a lot of people use them, but I really don't like it because of the notching and stuff. It's the MTI, which is basically it's a moving. I think it's called a moving target indication, I think it's called. But the thing is, it's just a kind of a pulse Doppler, a different type of pulse Doppler, but it is still pulse Doppler. And I once read that it's low frequency compared to the normal pulse Doppler, and that's the main difference, but it's really hard to find information about it, as I said. But it's just a normal pulse Doppler that you're going to use in very low altitudes. And this is the why they normally use the high altitude modes use the look down mode of the search mode, and then after you descend to 2000 meters, it will automatically change to MTI. Because for very low ground stuff, you know, against the ground, you know, people that are flying like 10 meters or something, the MTI will be the way to detect them. You know, so the search mode can have a lot of filtering systems, but it is limited by a little bit of the ground clutter anyway, so you ended up having to use the MTI mode. Remember, it's like a pulse Doppler. I don't think it has the, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't have the IFF systems, but it's still pretty good to use, and in certain situations, it basically is a little bit smaller, the amount of detection window that you have, you know, so you have only 5 degrees and you cannot change it. The range is 30 kilometers as well, but you're not going to be detecting anything past beyond that because you are flying really low, so you don't need to, you know. But yeah, basically this is the pulse Doppler mode of the radar. So you will automatically change from low altitude to high altitude. So when you fly high altitude, you will only have the normal search and look down, and if you fly low, you will have only the normal search mode for the low altitude and MTI. So it automatically changes between those two from those two, you know. Of course, remember the MTI has really bad problems against notchings and stuff like that, but the blind speeds of it are better than the F-14, for example. So it's not the worst pulse Doppler ever. I think it's worse than the APG-66 on the Kai's radar, or even the Vegan, but it is way better at that against the F4J and the F14. So it's just something to consider. Okay. Okay. Of course, these are for the radar missiles. And for dogfights, which normally helps a little bit, we have the vertical scan acquire mode, which basically means that it is a dogfight mode that you just point it in the direction of the target, and it will lock it. But remember, this mode can only be used at lower distances. Even though it's saying 30 kilometers there, I managed to get a lock from 10, 15 maybe, but past beyond that is really hard to have a lock on that sometimes. So consider that. And it has the acquire MTI, of course, as well. So if you are using MTI and you click that button to use the acquire mode for the dogfight mode, vertical scan, it will lock with the pulse Doppler. If you use the normal search mode, it will lock with the normal search mode. Okay. These are normally for dogfights, as I said. So if you're turning and stuff, you can do this. Another thing that you have to consider, of course, is its tracking mode. So you have the TRK there. We have the normal TRK and the MTI TRK, of course, because it's the tracking and the pulse Doppler tracking. So remember that, of course, you have the normal scan modes, and that it's the tracking mode because it doesn't have TWS or anything like that. So it's just single track, target track. So it will just lock one target and remain the energy at one target. Okay, so this is the modes for the radar, but of course the MiG-23 doesn't have only that. It has the IRST, so the infrared search and track, which is basically a very large IR sensor like the ones on the missiles, but it basically detects a target and sends the information for the HUD, and you can actually lock it. It has two types of modes, 60 degrees by 15, vertically, and 15 by 7, a very small target for up and close. Still has the normal vertical target mode for dogfights, but remember the IRST of the aircraft is below the nose, so if the aircraft flies above it, you will lose the target, the lock that you receive. It doesn't it doesn't say anything to enemy RWR, so it's one of the main reasons why people like to use the R-24 or even the R-60s together with this. I use every single match with the R-60s, just a way to get the best possible solution for the R-60 without having to actually lock with the radar and tell the guy that you are there. So yeah, and you can actually detect targets as well, so it is very, very good, especially in simulator. It's pretty amazing to have this. But it's one of those modes that you have to consider that it's not a proper radar, so yeah. But anyway, you have the tracking IR and the search IR with those modes, and you can change it right there to the right or to the left, So consider it using that. It's really good. And of course, in the last patch, they actually changed something with this, which is basically that he has distance tracking. I don't know why it has this. I don't think he had in real life, but now it says the direction of the target. Instead of only the box, it says the direction that the target is going and the distance. I don't know how it does that, but it does. So yeah, kind of weird, but I don't know. But basically this is it for the radar. Consider using the R24R. I still prefer it over the T variant, even though the T variant is very, very good at certain situations. Remember that, of course, you still have to have the both circles red to actually launch an R24, and remember to not use the IRST if you are using the radar. Remember to change it to the radar before you lock the target, because the missile actually needs the radar lock to get radiation from the target and then guide the missile. Okay? So yeah, basically this is it, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope you find it informative, and just let's get better at BVR. It's the future of War Thunder. We probably will see stuff like a MiG-25, maybe 31, maybe 29. So if you are a Russian main or a German main, of course the Germans will probably receive the MiG-29 also. In the future, you will need to learn how to use the BVR and the R-24 together with the RP-23 radar. Can be one of the most deadly types of combinations in War Thunder to do BVR. Even though the M7F technically has more range than the R-24, I still think that the R-24 is better, especially at closer ranges. It has way better acceleration, making it way better to actually turn and get the guy. So yeah, if you are using the normal search modes, remember to maintain the lock if you already fired the missile, and if the guy is chaffing, just maintain the lock. Wait for the lock on the chaff, you know, and wait for the target to be destroyed, because the R-24 will still go for the target, okay? The AIM-7F, of course, does that too. So I hope you enjoyed, and make sure to subscribe, be a member, and I see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.